All right, we should be looking. All right,
All right, we're going to call the meeting in order. We'll start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I like the flag there, Jason. It helps.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
pleasure.
Today's meeting is being streamed live on the internet and video recorded. I declare that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the pandemic. Physical presence for the meeting is not feasible due to the pandemic. All board members verify they can hear one another, hear the discussion, and their microphones are working. Kara, can you do the roll?
Dr. Powell.
Here.
There she is.
Here.
Mrs. Restivo.
Here.
Dr. Faco.
Here.
Mr. Grady.
Here.
Mrs. Lyons.
Here.
Mrs. Rubio.
Here.
Mrs. Lakowitz.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody. So just to let everybody know, and for the public as well, we would love to be in person as a school board, but in the tier 3 stage, while schools can function in person, there are still meeting restrictions with respect to school board meetings, and participants have to be 10 or less. So it is recommended that we continue to meet remotely while in tier 3. So I just wanted to clarify that because we are going to return to in-person next week. So we'll get to that in a little bit. And we're going to start with a student. We're doing these virtual student tributes, and today we are going to start with Navajo. So I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. And I'm going to start presenting Navajo this month, and I'm going to let Miss Curran introduce the what we're going to see on the screen here in a second. And then I'll go to the videotape. Ms. Curran, do you want to just give a brief introduction?
Sure. This is our Eagle of the Month nomination video. So every month our students focus on a different SEL competency. So since social emotional learning is really a focus this year and always in District 128, we really want the students to focus on those different character traits. So some of the past character traits have been empathy, responsibility, and this month was compassion or being compassionate. And we do social emotional learning lessons. All of the teachers teach those lessons throughout the month, and the students really work on that carryover. So here's the nomination video, and then the students' responses, what compassion means to them, and then also how they see compassion happening throughout their own lives.
Okay, thank you so much. Videotape. All right.
It's Miss Curran here, your principal at Navajo. Well, we are here today to celebrate our November Eagles of the Month for displaying the character trait compassion. Now, being compassionate really arises when you perceive another person is suffering or feeling down, and you're motivated to relieve that suffering, and you really want to build them up. So this really arises from empathy, which was one of our other character traits, where you really understand how another person is feeling and you want to use kindness to build that person up. So I am so proud to see so much compassion here in Navajo. There are so many people who are always willing to help each other out, the staff and the students included. And I am really proud of all of our Eagles of the Month. So let's hear those nominations and continue to be flying eagles soaring high.
Hello. This student has demonstrated compassion by being kind and patient with others. She is always willing to help out and initiates providing support to others without being asked. This year's Eagle of the Month nominee for Mrs. Patterson's class is Kara Gaduk. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you.
Being compassionate to me means helping others and being kind to others. I think I was compassionate by helping others when the teacher didn't ask, and if somebody got hurt at recess, I would help them.
November's Eagle of the Month trait is compassion. The student that I have chosen for the Eagle of the Month is Abby Caulfield. The reason I chose Abby is because on a daily basis, she shows compassion and kindness to her classmates. She's always willing to help someone who is in need, is always willing to help them find their page in their book or show them what we're supposed to be working on. She shows true kindness to all students. Also, since we've been at home with remote learning, I noticed that she has compassion towards her own siblings. So this month, Abby Caulfield, congratulations.
Hi, I'm Abby Caulfield, and I am very honored to be chosen for Eagle of the Month. I cried happy tears, and I am very happy. I have a lot of love in my heart and share it with other people. Being compassionate is important to me. Thank you for choosing me for Eagle of the Month. And I'm very happy. Thank you.
This month's Eagle has compassion at the heart of everything they do. They are the first person to welcome a new visitor to our class and make sure that they feel part of our community. They are always thinking about the characters we're learning about and how their own real life experiences help them connect and understand others. And they are working hard in our class to understand and connect with all of our classmates during morning meeting and other times of the day. They're always thinking about others and how they can put them first and how they can support them. They've done a wonderful job this month, so congratulations to our Eagle, Daniel.
Student has demonstrated empathy, not only by showing kindness to his classmates and teachers, but he has also noticed the feelings of others around him, and he has taken an opportunity to stop and ask others how they were feeling and if they were okay. November's Eagle of the Month nominee for Mrs. Burish's class goes to Amir Wisha. Congratulations.
The Eagle of the Month for November in Mrs. Degnan's class has demonstrated compassion by sharing stories, starting casual conversations, help problem solve, going out of his way to give compliments and check in with other students. And I'm all around very proud of this student. And November's Eagle of the Month for Mrs. Degnan's class is Oliver Freimuth. Congratulations, Oliver.
Hi, I'm Oliver, and I was the Eagle of the Month for November. When I was chosen, I thought I was scared and that I was happy. I was scared because I'm really not that used to that much attention usually, and happy because, well, I just won Eagle of the Month. I gotta be happy. Being compassionate to me feels like walking. You're someone else's sunshine, and you just need to be there for him or her. So it just means a real lot to me. Thank you and goodbye.
I think that this student demonstrated the November Eagle of the Month trait compassion by being so welcoming while I was in the classroom for the first week, and also just being kind and following directions and always being ready to work. So the student that I nominate for room 10 Eagle of the Month is Aiden. Great job, Aiden.
I am very grateful that I was picked as November's Eagle of the Month. November's Eagle of the Month character trait was compassionate. I think compassionate means helping others, being genuine, and showing care and kindness. Compassionate is very important because it's not always about yourself. It is about other people. When I was picked as November's Eagle of the Month, my reaction was very excited. I also hope that everyone else keeps showing compassionate. Thank you.
Hi, Eagles. This month's character trait is compassion, and that is kindness in action, showing compassion to fellow students, family members, how you treat others, how you speak to and about others, and all situations around you. This student is a very compassionate young man, and his name is Chase Maxwell. Congratulations, Chase.
Hi, my name is Chase Maxwell. I'm the November Eagle for Miss Castellana's class. The character target for November is compassionate. I think compassion means being kind to your fellow classmates, siblings, just anyone, being kind in action. Some ways I try to be compassionate at school or at home is being nice and respectful to my family and friends. And one day, one of my friends came to school for being absent for a long time. And I helped him get his things organized, and it just brought a warm feeling to me, and I was happy. Being compassionate is important to me because I love it and really do it a lot. And it's important because when you do it, it encourages others to do it too. And I'm so happy I was chosen.
Eagles, this month, our Eagle has demonstrated the trait of compassion by always making sure that their classmates are okay, checking in on them, asking them if they need help, and just making sure that they have the help they need when they need it. That's why I'm happy to announce that 5 Darwin's Eagle of the Month for the month of November for compassion is Samira Kara. Congratulations, Samira.
Hi, I'm Samira, and I think compassion means to be empathetic to others, to be kind to others, and help others. And to me, I think everyone needs to do that. How about you?
The specials team has nominated Michaela Young and Lauren Wall for being compassionate, kind, and thoughtful, both in the classroom and when online. Congratulations to both of you.
I am really proud of myself for being Eagle of the Month because I've never been Eagle of the Month before, and or well, not this year yet, but yeah, and when I told my parents that like I got like a certificate and all that stuff and that I've won Eagle of the Month for like being compassionate, they were like, oh yeah, you're super compassionate and all that stuff like that. So I'm really proud of myself for being Eagle of the Month. Thank you so much.
Okay. I don't know if that doesn't make you smile. I don't know what would. Miss Curran, thank you for putting that together and organizing that so nicely. It is truly amazing to be able to hear from those kids, especially for them to articulate compassion the way that they did. I don't think I could articulate it that way at 10 years old. So thanks again for sharing that with us.
Yeah, we're really proud of all of our students, and thank you to Jason for compiling all the videos too. You did a really great job.
So thanks. Okay, the next thing in my report is just an update on where we are and where we're headed. So I'm super excited to share, as the board already knows, and so does the public, or at least our families, is that we are going to be able to bring our students back on Monday. Woohoo! So a couple of just points around that. We extended through this week, as you know, we did have some volatile positivity rates that were kind of up and down and still a bit higher this past week until the last 5 days. And so we were out, and we also had some staffing challenges, but we've resolved the staffing challenges and the rates have been down. So good job, Palos Heights, keep it up. Please wear your masks, socially distance, wash your hands so that we can keep our kids in school. And we are excited to come back and hopefully make it through the next 7 days before break. And then, as you know, the plan is to stay remote through January 6th, 7th, and 8th when we return from winter break, and then come back in person January 11th. And those 10 days post New Year's is to allow for family gathering quarantines that might be necessary, or travel quarantines that might be necessary. As you know, after Thanksgiving, there was that spike, and we're hoping we don't see that after the holidays, but in anticipation of the high likelihood of it, we are not going to plan to return until January 11th. And we will monitor things that first week of January, just to be sure that it is going to be safe to return. The planning committee, which we have, we're still working with about 15 members of our ongoing planning committee, which reviews our plan and revisits things, is going to revisit the new Tier 3 mitigation guidelines that came out. And they're going to be looking at what the school directions are within those guidelines. So there were some updates, even though the state is in Tier 3 in many of, well, at least in many of the counties, especially Cook, schools are still permitted to run in-person models based on their own local metrics and decision-making practices related to being able to keep people safe and healthy. So that's really your ability to mitigate, your ability to have the health and safety protocols in place that will keep everyone safe at school. So with that, we've been doing that all along. Our plan has always been that. And so it doesn't impact our plan dramatically. However, what we do want to revisit is that Governor Pritzker actually identified his own return to Tier 2 mitigation metric, which is 3 consecutive days below a 12% rolling average positivity rate in a region for a region to return to Tier 2. So we're going to take a look at that recommendation as far as a county level, regional recommendation, and see if that has any validity or impact on the way we've been managing our plan. And they also emphasize that in schools, the contact tracing and spread within the school community is something to really pay attention to, which is something we've already been doing as well. So I feel like a lot of the recommendations have already been part of our plan. It's really the new return to Tier 2 metric that we'll spend some time discussing and see if there's any adjustments that we feel we should make. And on your memo regarding the planning committee, our nurse, Mrs. Gadick, I just want to give her another shout out. I know we honored her once before. I can't tell you how hard this woman is working as our COVID nurse and all the hours she's putting into making sure that we have a safe environment and that it's safe to be here at school. And so she provided some consultation and has sat in on some school nurse and wellness webinars as well with IDPH and concurs with reexamining the metric between 8 and 12%, focusing more on our school spread within our community and our ability to staff and, our context in being able to keep people healthy and safe. So I just wanted to update the board on all of that as we look forward and continue to monitor when we can be in and when we can be out and how that's looking. And then we will also, as a committee, just revisit the sunsetting of the Family First Coronavirus Act, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the agenda. That sunsets on December 31st. So we're just going to share the board's decision tonight based on that sunset in terms of any action we might take as a district and an organization to support our staff with relationship to that change. So I will be updating them after this meeting tonight on that as well. So that's my update regarding the plan. None of these decisions, I just want to reiterate, are taken lightly. They don't come with a lot of sleep at night. We still worry about everyone's health and safety. So if you are watching out there and you are a family member, please, 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 if your children are exhibiting symptoms, do not send them here. Please call, check in with us. Please also, if you've been exposed or you're awaiting a test result, please do not send your children in. Please call us and let us work with you on alternate plans so we can keep our doors open, because that's the only way we'll be able to do it, is to avoid spread in our walls. So thank you for everyone's efforts so far. We've appreciated it. Questions on that item? Anybody? Okay. All right. So that is a celebration. I did do, as a few of you have shared, I did my own little happy dance in the office because I truly miss kids. It is very lonely around here. Not that I don't love you all staff members, but it's more fun when there's kids. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to share was the work of the Behavior Systems and Supports Committee, which we pulled together, which is a board committee. It sort of is encompassing the special education committee that looks at the special education discipline practices, but then also the behavior committee under the board's purview. And Mrs. Rubio and Mrs. Restivo, thank you so much for your service on this committee and helping us out with this work. I was just going to briefly share the presentation that we shared with the committee and the work of the committee so the board could see where we were headed. So what we began with was really using our handbook, which is where we house all of the major pieces of information related to rules and consequences and how we work with our kids. And so all of the actions that we might take as a school district around discipline and behavior are housed in that handbook, along with other pertinent information. And we wanted to take a look at how that vehicle is serving our community. But before we did that, I wanted to work with the committee to lay some context around where we're headed around culture and climate, because that is a very strong umbrella over what we do with teaching students appropriate behavior and working with kids on expected versus unexpected behavior. So this was the PowerPoint we shared with the committee. I'm not going to go as in-depth as I did with the committee, but just to give you an overview, we talk about positive school culture and climate in 3 prongs, kind of like the foundation of a stool. You know, architects, Nikki, architects love triangles, right? So our triangle for culture and climate is this idea of social emotional learning. And then underneath that, the positive behavior intervention and supports that we put into place. And then this idea of restorative practices, which is a newer initiative in relationship to this bigger picture of culture and climate. So we gave the committee sort of some background on social emotional learning. Basically, what I want to highlight here is there are 3 major standards with that. So there's the self-awareness and self-management skills, there's the social awareness and interpersonal skills, and then there's the decision-making and responsible behavior that we try to instill in our kids. And social emotional learning is taught in a number of ways. There are some direct instruction pieces to teaching kids how to develop these skills, but then it's also integrated into everything we do. And so when you're thinking about that, those 5 competencies that are embedded in the standards are at the core of social emotional learning. And this graphic comes from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is a research think tank that provides resources and best practices and research around social emotional learning. And we did a very large professional development initiative and session last year around those 5 competencies. And we explored how those relate to how we deliver instruction in the classroom and how they tie into our instructional practices. So the entire staff engaged in some professional development related to those competencies last year. And then that connects back to what we do with our kids. And with our kids, all of our buildings have a positive behavior intervention and support system, as you know, and their mottos are down there at the bottom. You can see it developmentally scaffolds up. So Indian Hills is be kind, be ready, be safe. Chip, be respectful, be responsible, be safe. Navajo is the same as Chippewa. And then Independence, be respectful, be responsible, be honest, and have integrity. So this framework of positive behavioral interventions is what we work from to teach expected and unexpected behavior and appropriate behavior. And we also have the kids learn about what is unexpected behavior so that they can see what the example and the non-examples are in terms of how they should carry themselves in interactions with each other, with their teachers, with people outside of the school and in our community. So it's the foundation for how we lay the groundwork around expectations. And we have a lot of incentive systems and school-wide systems. Eagle of the Month, as you saw in the beginning of this presentation, is one of those elements of a PBIS system that would highlight how students are carrying out those expectations. And each building spends time explicitly teaching those skills in the beginning of the year and then reinforcing them throughout the year. There's all school assemblies tied to the incentives. At Independence, we've talked about the house system in the past. Those house system points they earn have a lot to do with the PBIS system and expected behaviors at Independence. And so it's constantly this umbrella that we use to reinforce the social emotional learning standards, but then also kind of hold kids to an explicit concrete standard. This third prong, which is newer to us and which we are currently doing some professional development around across all of our schools, is the restorative practice prong. And when you think about this, in a traditional system where you're issuing consequences, the consequence that most schools have at their fingertips is time, right? And that's usually in the form of a detention or missing something. And so time is taken from a student. When we do that, if we're not focused on the restorative piece of the practice, we're missing an opportunity to really actually change behavior, which is at the root of what we want to do. So this restorative piece is a really important piece. And what we do in the restorative piece is we focus on relationship, and we focus on collaborative problem solving, and we focus on how we may have impacted somebody else, the harm that we may have done, versus being punitive about the behavior itself. So we're really looking at how to empower change and growth and enhance the student's responsibility, the student's ability to take responsibility for their actions. And so when we consequence, we want to start building in the restorative piece to that consequence. So if I'm going to miss something, I'm going to spend that time working on that restoration rather than sitting in silence maybe and doing nothing. So in a traditional system, its rules are broken. In the restorative approach, it's that you harmed a relationship or a person. So you can see the differences here. Traditional is very punitive, restorative is very relationship focused and trying to then repair. So we're looking at giving those opportunities to make it right, to fix it in a restorative way. And then this is just some additional, this was one of the workshops many of our staff attended on how we do that. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where you take the consequence, which is the loss of time, and you find it, you turn it into an opportunity and invest that time in focusing on teaching on replacement behavior or identifying replacement behaviors. And then there has to be some motivation or incentive to the perpetrator who committed the offense or engaged in the inappropriate or unexpected behavior. And the incentive would be that they're going to make a relationship better, not like a candy bar or a prize. It would be more of an internal motivator than an external motivator. So that's the work that we're really doing this year. So I presented that all to the committee, and then they took that umbrella, sort of those three pillars, and then dug into what does our handbook look like and how does our handbook communicate those values, which if you think about a traditional handbook, it really doesn't. It's really a list of don'ts and ifs. If you don't do this, then this will happen. If you don't do this, this will happen. And it has a very negative, punitive sort of feel to it when we examined it. So the outcomes from the committee were to do a complete revisioning of the handbook, which we're super excited about. I know I'm excited. I think the committee's pretty excited too. I'll let Mrs. Restivo and Mrs. Rubio comment on that at the end for anything they wanted to add. But we want it to be an interactive tool. So we're going to look at a 21st century platform for the handbook. We want it to be more valued. The committee talked about creating an introduction that's more of a philosophical framework that captures what we value around school culture and climate, and prioritizing the content organization to focus on what's important to parents. So they gave us some feedback on the pieces within the handbook that are really inform what happens here in school and is that vehicle of communication, and which things are more legal content that has to be embedded that may not be everyday things that we're worried about. And we want to also engage our students in this process and get some student-friendly language into the handbook as well. So we're going to engage the Independent Student Council and the high flyers, possibly at Navajo, to give us some feedback around that as well. And we're going to go ahead and draft it from a more positive and supportive perspective to in line with that PBIS and restorative philosophy rather than what not to do punitive framework. So we're going to be working on that platform. That handbook is going to take a lot of work. This is not something that's going to be ready overnight. Traditionally, we've had the handbook as like a checkbox on our registration process. For this year, as we relaunch a whole new platform, we'd like to pull it out of there and really relaunch it separately closer to the start of school and really launch it in a bigger way so that it becomes more of a focal point and everyone can really appreciate the new format. So we are going to delay the release of that handbook closer to the start of the school year when we really can take the time to develop it the way that we want. And then as we look to launch strategic planning next, later this spring with some feedback from the community, and then into the fall heavily next year, and thinking about that portrait of an independence graduate, what do we want for our graduates to backward design? this vehicle for communication is going to be intended to fold right into that, to support that communication around what we want for our kids. So we'll be folding some of that into that vehicle going forward. And then culture and climate will hopefully naturally emerge somewhere in that plan. And then equity around what we do, which really gets also at that restorative piece, will also be embedded in there to make sure that we're responding to our students, all of our students, in a manner that's equitable. So this is like flagship stuff. You won't find a handbook out there right now. We tried to see if there was one out there. I couldn't find one that does what we're talking about. And I said to Kathy Leslie, who's co-facilitating the committee, and Jason's now going to engage in working with her on creating the platform. I said, this could be a show that goes on the road once it's all done, something that people truly value and doesn't just become something that we just do a check mark and no one actually ever reads. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pull the Zoom back up and see if there's anything Mrs. Restivo or Mrs. Rubio would like to add with relationship to this work, or Mrs. Leslie at all as my co-facilitator. Anything that I missed or you think you want to add?
No, I think that was a great summary of everything that's going on. I just want to say how grateful I am for all of the parents, staff, and Mrs. Restivo and Mrs. Rubio for the work. It's been a great committee with a lot of good conversation.
Oh, we probably should mention that there were several parents on the committee in addition to staff members. So it was a fairly large committee, but yes. So thank you to Mrs. Flynn and Mr. Carr and Mrs. Walzak and Mrs. Doherty and Mrs. Bird and Mr. Socha, and then all of the staff members that participated in that committee, because it was some good work. Anything else, Mrs. Restivo, Mrs. Rubio? Okay. All right. So that's a big project, and it's one that I mean, this is the stuff I get excited about because it's the stuff that impacts kids directly, that you can see, that you can feel, and I'm excited that we can think about a way to engage our community too in a different kind of way. Okay. So next up for me would be planning for 2020, 21, 22. I actually put 2021. I should have put 21, 22 on the agenda. Sorry about that. I guess I'm still stuck in my COVID timeline here. It should have been 21, 22. So a couple of things. The pandemic has kind of put everything in a little bit of a delay here in a pattern. So I just wanted the board to kind of have a viewpoint in comparison to last year, what our timelines look like and where we are this year with timelines. So for registration, we launched registration towards the end of February, mid to end of February last year. We'd like to delay that a couple of weeks to the first week of March. We hope to have a little bit of a better picture. Not that it'll be much, but it'll help us a little bit just to maybe anticipate what's coming our way, and give us some time also, because I have a feeling we're going to have to create a dual platform, a plan for registering our preschoolers and kindergartners in full day programs, and a plan for registering our little people in half day programs as a backup. So we want to create the two parallel models and determine what is the better avenue to go to register half day and then transition it to full, or register for full and cut it back to half as we had to do this year. Should we still be stuck in a situation where we can't have all our kids in a room together because of social distancing? I'm hoping that's not the case. I mean, you hear all this good news about vaccines and getting kids back in school, but I think we have to prepare and plan for both at the moment. So we would delay that a little bit. And then we would open up our 1 through 8 registration at a similar time frame to what we did last year, which is the week after spring vacation, spring break. And then with that, we reviewed school fees last year in January. We'll do that again, just cross-check school fees and have some discussions about half day versus full day fees again, and partial fees, should we find ourselves still in a COVID world, which again, I'm hoping we're not. I wish we could delay the whole thing till we knew for sure, but we can't do that. So we'll just have to start to create parallel worlds, because from a timing standpoint, it would never work to wait till summer to figure all this out. Staffing recommendations, just as I did last year, I'll present a staffing model to you all in February. Again, it will be 2 scenarios. I will have a COVID staffing model and a return to more typical class size staffing models. We can't predict where we'll be, and we will, we have the 2 one-year positions that we hired. Those will release as expected, and that was the expectation. And then if we are still in a COVID model rehire, we will reevaluate the rehiring. At this point in time, we're not sure we'll have to do a reduction in force on anyone beyond that, because we used a lot of internal people to address our COVID plan, which is really great. At the most, we would have 1 reduction in force, if at all. And that I can't really solidify until we look at kindergarten enrollment and the nature of what unfolds in the next 60 days. So I'm not ready to go there yet. So in February, we will look at the staffing plan and kind of see where we're at related to that. Questions on those 2 pieces so far before we go further?
I don't have any, no.
Okay.
It makes sense to me. I really hope we don't have to make the COVID model, but.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to make the COVID model. Let's hope we don't have to use the COVID model. Yeah. The other thing is the calendar recommendation. I want to wait till we get Shepherd's calendar, because we ended up amending twice after that. So there's no point in sort of approving our final calendar till we kind of see Shepherd's, because we do align with them on certain things. But I will start the committee work in January for the calendar work, and then we won't finalize anything until we see where Shepherd lands as well. And then we can do it together, likely in February. And then the 5-year long-range plan updates, those are all, we did those in March last year. We'll do them again in March this year, with one potential exception. We're going to have a finance committee meeting in January and look at our potential to issue bonds. And so we may in February want to take an initial look at that finance piece and the implications of a bond issue before we come back in March to present a more long-term financial projection, 5-year projection. So we may have an initial finance, after the finance committee meeting in January, we may have an initial finance conversation in February, and then long-range plan conversations in March. We'll be updating facilities, finance, and technology. And Jason will give you, it's going to be a little bit more detailed, broken down tech plan than just the simple budget sheet that you saw previously. We'll be fleshing that out a bit more specifically. Okay, questions on the.
Will staff be part of the 5-year plan too?
Yeah, so we'll do the staffing model in February, and then that folds into the finance picture, the long-term finance picture. Is that what you're talking about in terms of the modeling going forward? Yeah. Yeah. And like anticipating any attrition if we can, where we can, when we can.
Yep.
Yeah, especially, and you're going to probably see some changes related to that. So that was a good question, because Dr. Kirk at Independence, you know, because of COVID, we went into a grade level model rather than sharing vertically. And there have been some real benefits that staff and teams have realized around that. So we want to explore, as we come out of COVID, what does it look like to stay in that kind of a configuration versus going back to a more traditional configuration that we were in pre-COVID, which was more of a junior high model. So the staff at Independence is also going to be exploring that a little bit. And what is the implication if we stay as more of a middle school model versus a junior high model?
Okay.
So that'll all come forward. Any questions on that?
I don't know.
Okay, the last thing in my report is the community mailer. We were a little more delayed than we wanted to be with getting it out, but you know, I blame COVID for everything. I don't know how long I can hold on to that one, but for a little while longer. But anyway, I'm super excited though with the outcome. So
I told you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it was incredible. I told you how good
it looks great. Yeah. Fantastic.
I have to give Jason credit for the layout and for putting that all together. We're, you know, super excited about the way it came out. I'm excited about the alumni spotlight. That was really fun to do. And what we're going to do now is we have some additional alumni that we've reached out to, and we're going to try to feature one every month or every other month in the parent newsletter, and then collect those to go back in the community mailer the following year so that we can have this constant connection back to our alums wherever we can find it. So I think once people start to see how we're doing that, I think the wider community might start feeding us people, which will be great. That's our hope through that outreach. And yeah, so I was excited about that feature. Yeah, that's the end of my report. That'll be mailed out, Jason. It'll be ready from the print shop.
Yeah, I sent it to the printer, so I just have to hear back on his, length of time and so forth. But he has it, so hopefully.
He's pretty quick usually, so probably by next week sometime.
I hope so. Yeah.
It'll be ready to go.
All right. So board members, anybody have any questions or comments on the consent agenda items? All right. So I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items, which includes the minutes of the regular meeting of November 11th, approval of bills and payroll, the review of schools' activity accounts, approval of the December 2020 final tax levy, and employment of personnel.
So I'll second.
We do that 5th grade teacher for the long-term sub to hear me?
The 5th grade teacher is, we moved a.
That was Angela, okay. But how about the long-term substitute to the paraprofessional at Chippewa?
That was the one we discussed last meeting. So that's the one at Chippewa.
Did we not vote on that last meeting?
No, we just discussed it.
Okay, all right.
We discussed it closed and waited to vote on it this meeting.
I'll take the roll.
Yes.
Mrs. Lakowitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Rubio?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
Yes.
Dr. Faco?
Yes.
Mrs. Restivo?
Yes.
Dr. Powell?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Lakowitz, you voted on creating the position. We didn't vote on filling the position. That's where.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Old business, OGC.
Yeah, and before we move into Studio GC, if you recall, we were gonna have a hearing to transfer funds, but because we're gonna have a finance meeting in January, we decided to postpone that transfer of funds. So we'll repost the notice and we'll do the hearing at the February meeting if it's, or at the January meeting if it's necessary. We want to revisit that with the finance committee, which is why we did not put the hearing on the agenda for tonight. So now I'm going to introduce Nikki Bridges from Studio GC, and we're going to go over the roofing bid status of where we are. And before I turn it over to Nikki to get into some details, for the good of the whole board, and Nikki's going to explain this better than I will, but the way we set up the bidding of the projects was a little bit unique. So people could bid them either as separate projects or a combined project for Chippewa and Navajo. And because it was set up that way, it resulted in some unique bidding in terms of amounts. And so it became a little bit complex. And as you're looking at the bid structures and you see like for DCG and the Navajo roof, their bid, if you looked at that roof in isolation under their bid, would be more in line with where we were expecting it, but their combined bid was higher than their individual bid, so we couldn't take that as a low bid, so it got complicated. The Navajo roof is complicated.
The combined bid, they did not want both. I mean, right?
Right. Well, it's a stretch for them to do two roofs, right? And Nikki and I talked about that. Right now, for anyone to do two roofs, and I'm going to turn it over to her, not steal her thunder, but for anyone to do two roofs right now is a stretch. So you're going to see, we're going to pull apart the recommendation and maybe revise our timeline in this recommendation to be only looking tonight to get approval for the Chippewa project base and alternates. But I'll let Nikki go through all the rest of the explanation and we can come back to that motion and recommendation after we hear from Nikki.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen because I think it'll be a little bit easier
to explain with you while I point to some of the numbers. So, but just to start off, we did get good interest in, we did get good interest in the bids. We had 12 qualified bidders that showed up to the mandatory pre-bid meeting and pick up drawings from the blueprinter. So they were bidders of record. So we had 12 bidders of record. We ultimately received 5 bids on the bid date. And as Meryl was saying, we did have a rather complex bid structure. So I'm going to share my screen now so that I could explain that in a little more detail. I think somebody has to, the host has.
You have to give her permission. Hold on, I can do that.
Okay.
I'm just gonna make you, oh, you got it, Nikki? Yeah.
Yep. So I got a lot of different things open. So, so here's the bid tab worksheet that was included with the bid recommendation. And the first page has all no bids, none of those bidders bid. So I'm going to go to the second page because it's a little easier to explain if I use DCG roofing. So we did have a separate base bid for Navajo, a separate base bid, for Chippewa, a separate base bid for Navajo, and then a combined base bid. Number 3 was both schools combined. The alternate bids, these are the alternates all listed here on this side, correspond to the base bid. So 1A and 1B were related to Chippewa, 2A, 2B, and 2C were related to base bid 2, Navajo, and all of the 3s related to both of the schools combined. They were each of these pulled down into a combined bid. So as you can see, when we look at DCG roofing, their base bid for Chippewa was ultimately the lowest number for Chippewa. Their base bid for Navajo was ultimately the lowest number for Navajo. But unfortunately, their combined bid, and they were the only ones who actually bid it as a combined bid, their combined bid was higher than if you had added up base bid number 1 and base bid number 2 together. And in discussions with some of the bidders, basically, they don't have the capacity of metal crew in order to be able to, in an economic manner, perform both schools simultaneously. They would have to pull in people from other sources, and because of that, it would not be as cost effective of a way to perform the project. And just kind of as just a tiny bit of backstory, most of these roofers do both membrane style roofing, like what you would normally see as like a flat roof, and they do metal roofs. And when they do a flat roof, they use their metal crew in order to do like their flashing work or their sheet metal flashing work or their copings or whatever on that type of a roof system. And then they use those same metal crews in order to do an all metal roof. So if they tie up too much of their metal crew doing too many metal roofs, then they won't be able to also simultaneously accomplish their other membrane roofs over the summer because they'll pull their metal crew in to work on those as well. So it's a matter of balance for them. And in this case, the bidders were showing that they would not be able to do both roofs and still balance their other work simultaneously. So I hope that makes sense. Does that seem to make sense the way I explained it? So the other thing I wanted to explain is the alternate bids and what each of these numbers represented. So we have a graphic that we shared. I think you received this maybe yesterday or today. So just to really briefly explain, as I said, the alternate bids number with number 1 in front of them related to Chippewa. Alternate bid 1A and 2A, they both related to the same thing, 1A for Chippewa to A for Navajo, and they were to wire brush to remove the rust from the existing piping, the gas piping on the roof, and to prime and paint that gas piping. And just to show you, this is what we're referring to, this gas piping on the roof, because it is rusting. The rust is coming off and appearing on the roof surface. And once you have a new roof, we made the assumption that you probably wouldn't want that to be staining your new roof. So we did include that as an option. It wasn't part of the roofing scope. It would be kind of additional work, but we did include it as an option for you to consider as an alternate. And then secondly, at Chippewa, alternate bid 1B is to replace these panels. This would be the existing, the photo of the existing conditions here. These are metal panels. They match the existing metal panel roof system. So if you were looking down at the roof, the panels would ultimately look pretty much the same as these panels here. They were put on at the same time. They're the same age. In this case, the alternate bid 1B would be to not just.
Oh, where'd she go? We lost Nikki. She'll be back. I'll speak for her, but she's looking at the soffits. But while we're waiting for her to come back, the alternate was to match it and replace it. The soffitting you're going to see in terms of a structure that's going to match then what the new roof will look like, with cleaner lines and updating the look of the building at the same time, while also then upgrading it for that project. And while we're waiting for her to come back, and she explained the bidding process and why, as we're looking to separate the bids out, we think there's a chance we could get a better price on the Navajo roof by pushing it out separately and waiting to rebid it next year. Because if DCG bid it closer to our expected cost, our estimated cost this year in the, individual bids, then they could do one roof this summer, possibly one roof next summer, and we could save the $200,000 that you see, like what it would be higher if we went with the other contractor. So by taking Navajo off the plate this year, we could save a couple $100,000, push the project out just a bit, do one roof this year, one roof next summer of 22, and then the final two roofs in the summer of 23, or possibly even pushing the fourth one to the summer of 24, depending on the condition at that point. But Dave Adamos and I spoke today, Kim, we feel like the Navajo roof with the repair, the patchwork we did could wait one more summer, and we can maybe save a couple $100,000. We don't estimate that it'll get any worse. It won't be any worse than what it is right now in terms of bid structures, but it could even be possibly much better. So that was the rationale for sort of separating Navajo out and postponing that, and then spreading us out a little further with the projects. Did Nikki reappear yet, Jason? No.
I did like the new look of the roof, the siding.
So we were recommending the alternates, because we were going to recommend the alternates. Bill, I don't know if you or Rich want to chime in on that, but it doesn't make sense not to update that for the cost in the alternate bid structure for this particular project, and then having it match kind of what we're trying to do with the new metal roof that we're going to put on too.
Yeah, also I was going to say is Chippewa is at least within, a small difference from what we expected it to be. And then when you add in the alternate, it's within the line of what we budgeted for initially when we put the facilities plan together. And the Navajo roof, even the lowest bid from DCG is significantly more than what we expected. There's some complications that weren't anticipated when we put the budget together. So I not only do I think, we don't want to overpay by trying to do them both this summer. I also think, we need to take it back and make sure we're putting the right option on Navajo when we do it, and then kind of restack our priorities as a result of the increased cost.
Right. So that was sort of the.
It gives us some flexibility with the timing of our of the next bond issue too. So it won't be as much of a crunch to do that next year. We'll have a little more flexibility there.
We talked about there's the possibility of, if we're just doing one roof, looking at fund balance and then postponing the bond issue for another year. In that process, we could go out in spring of 22 instead of this year. I have to think about my years right now. I can't keep them
back.
No,
Nikki's back.
So sorry. That could not have happened at a worse time.
It's okay. I kind of explained why we were maybe recommending splitting off Navajo from Chippewa. We got to talk about that a little bit while you were gone. And,
okay. That was crazy. I'm so sorry. Would you like me to continue?
Yeah, so I just filled them in, like that alternate bids for the soffit work and the paneling is so that we can align it and make the project look comprehensive, as well as like the age of it is similar. So it will be a clean like redo of all the pieces that fit together rather than looking patchworked if we didn't consider the alternates.
That sounds perfect. Yes.
Nikki, can you share your screen and show everybody the alternates? Because I think the pictures do it better justice than just talking about it. I know the board saw it, but.
Sorry, everything's willy-nilly because my computer rebooted. All right. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right, great. So as I was saying, these panels are alternate bid 1B at Chippewa. So we would be replacing those panels across the school. We selected panels that would look, have these horizontal ribs similar to these images below. They're just kind of to show you a realistic view of, you know, what that type of panels that would be used to replace it. So that would go around the building at Chippewa. At Navajo, alternate bid 2A was for the gas piping. Alternate bid 2B was for the panels above the windows. So on the left is what they look like now. On the right is an image of what they would look like if they were replaced with those same ribbed panels that are shown below here. And then alternate bid 2C was to resurface these panels below the windows by providing new aluminum faced composite panels below the windows as well, just so that everything would match. So,
and these are peeling down here.
Yeah, either.
Okay.
Peeling.
Is there any insulation benefit to that?
It would be another panel in addition to the one you have. So there would be a bit of insulation value, but it wouldn't be the primary reason. I mean, you're still going to have the rest of the windows above it, which, you know, it's a window unit. So overall, it's going to have a similar value. It's not going to give you any sort of substantial difference.
It just all would match. Okay.
So as a result of like the bidding structure and what happened, the recommendation that I wanted to put forward was to look at approving the bid for the Chippewa base bid, as well as the alternate bids for Chippewa for the summer of 2021, and then delaying our approval process and going out to bid next year to consider the Navajo project, and we'll reprioritize then Indian Hill and Independence after that.
Any questions from any of the board members?
And so are you recommending DCG then?
That is correct. For the Chippewa.
So yeah, the action item would be to accept the bid for Chippewa with the 2 alternates.
Correct.
And then we would delay Navajo.
You need a motion for that, Bill?
Yeah, just, yeah, if nobody has any questions, yeah, we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid from DCG for Chippewa, including the two extra items.
I'll second.
Dr. Powell,
Yes.
Mrs. Restivo,
Yes.
Dr. Faco,
Yes.
Mr. Grady,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Rubio,
Yes.
Mrs. Lackowitz.
Yes.
Thank you. I think in the end, by doing one roof at a time, as Nikki and I alluded to, I think we're going to be better off in the end, financially, and also probably just from a workmanship perspective as well, given the stretch of the contractors. So thank you. Nikki, do you want to then talk about any updates related to the tuck pointing masonry and then also the MWRD?
Yes, so I guess maybe, and actually we haven't necessarily discussed this yet, not knowing the outcome of the roofing bids, but the masonry restoration was related to both Chippewa and Navajo and related to the roofing work. So I guess we should discuss if we'll only be proceeding with that now for Chippewa.
That makes sense to me, because I think doing that ahead of then ripping a roof off probably.
Right. A lot of the work is behind the gutters and down, behind the downspouts primarily. So if we're not removing the downspouts at Navajo this summer, we should probably wait on that one.
Does the board agree with that?
Yes.
I agree.
Okay. So in relationship to the site work and the schedule of those projects, they are proceeding as scheduled as far as our progress on the drawings and the submission to the municipality and the MWRD. Just to kind of update you on that, we submitted within the time frame. I don't remember the exact date, I'm sorry, off the top of my head, but we submitted within the time frame that we had previously told you. It has gone through it has gone through Palos Heights and has also just last week got signed by they hire an outside engineer to review their civil work. And I know everyone's stopped listening to me because he's so cute. Anyway, so we received their sign off near the end of last week. Then it went back to our engineer, and he was able, after getting their sign off, to physically send it with that approval to the MWRD. They take about a week to process it, and then they have 2 weeks to respond with their first comments. So that initial process took longer than we anticipated as far as getting the sign off from the village and the village engineer. But now that we do, we expect to progress within that time frame. We should have then, based on that time frame, we would get our review comments back around the holidays. So I don't know how that holiday schedule will affect it. It may be like then just after the holidays that we receive it. And because of all that, sorry, I'm being long-winded, but because of all that, because we won't have their comments back until then, we are recommending that we go out to bid after we receive their comments so that we can incorporate all of their comments into our bid set prior to going out to bid for the work at Independence. And so we would then be going out to bid in January for a bid period time in January and a February board approval.
Probably makes sense with the holidays, is what Pat, Nikki, and I discussed last week anyway.
Right. It can be a little tricky bidding during the holiday time anyway, and I think we'll maximize our bidders and have more interest in the project if we don't bid over the holidays as well. So that would be our recommendation. And there's no long lead time items, and there's nothing that would prevent it from finishing on time. There's no reason that we could think of that that would be a deterrent in that regard. So as far as delaying the bidding process.
Any questions on any of those updates? Anybody?
Not for me.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Sorry that your computer glitched on you. I know that's stressful.
Sorry. I apologize to everyone for that.
With a little bit of grace, I think I would have been more freaked out. Okay.
Have a nice holiday, Nikki.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Tell Pat we wish him well.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you.
I did send him out a little thing of get well chocolate. Hopefully he got it. So
that was so nice.
Send it on behalf of all of us from me. So.
All right. Well, happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
Okay.
All right, new business.
Okay, so you heard me mention at the beginning of the meeting, the Family First Coronavirus Act that was passed by the federal government for just for paid time off for employees is sunsetting on December 31st. It is the opinion of most people and of our attorneys, as well as the Illinois Association of School Administrators, that we're not going to see this extended anytime before the change of power or inauguration of the presidency. So, and that's not going to be any sooner than January 20th. So districts have the ability to consider the impact of that locally. And so in looking at what the Family First Act provided, I put it in your packet for you to see in terms of what the look like is if someone had to quarantine or isolate because of being positive, they could be compensated without having to use their own personal sick time. So it was just considered district paid time off for 2 weeks for the quarantine period at their full rate of pay. If they were a close contact and had a quarantine, that was the same allowance. So 2 weeks full pay, but not having to use your own personal or sick days. A third scenario was if you were experiencing symptoms and you needed to go get a test, then you also were entitled to the full pay while you were waiting for the results of your test, and you did not have to use your own personal or sick days. Because of the pandemic and because some of that is not in an employee's control because you're required to quarantine before you can return to work, I wanted to have the discussion and make the recommendation that we consider as a district continuing to use district time off for those 3 scenarios rather than asking our employees to use their own personal sick time. It won't cost us anymore because if they have unless somebody had not any sick days and was going unpaid. But for people who have the sick time, we would still be paying them their salaries. They would just be losing their sick days because they had to take COVID time off. So the recommendation is basically we don't dock them their sick days for those 3 scenarios and that we continue to just compensate them as district paid time off. I'm not recommending that we necessarily go any further with the other 3 allowances that were there. Certainly number 4 can be a discussion with the board. The 4th scenario was caring for someone else, not the employee themselves, who might have to quarantine. And that one in the FFCRA regulation was 2 weeks at 2/3 rate of pay, but employees could substitute their own sick time for full rate of pay. So if they wanted to get their full rate of pay, they were going to use their own sick time anyway. Otherwise, it's 2/3 rate of pay. I'm not necessarily recommending that to care for someone else that you consider absorbing that, but that's certainly a decision the board could make. So number 4 is really at the purview of the board, since we're not talking about the employee, we're talking about them caring for someone else. Number 5 is the childcare for school closures. We're not recommending that we continue to provide paid time off for that allowance. Parks and Rec has still been super flexible for our own staff of being able to move kids in and out of their program at their leisure. There's no need to commit or or they'll take them at any point in time. They'll exit and enter them at any point in time over there. And most of our staff have had this whole entire time knowing that in January, the childcare piece was likely going to go away. And we have, if we continue to offer that with all the remote schedules being all over the place, we could find ourselves in a staffing conundrum, given that, you know, unless it's renewed at the federal level. And then, of course, we would, you know, continue to support it. So in talking with, I don't know what other districts are going to do with this. I don't know anyone that's made a decision about it. Most are considering the first two for sure, because those are really out of an employee's control. But I don't know of anyone extending the child care leave at this point, nor does the attorney recommend that we do that at this point. So now I will turn it over to you all to determine where you want to go with that.
Is this limited to how many times they can take this, or is it just?
So no, because each time you're, well, if you're positive, you can't be here. If you're exposed, you can't be here. So either way, you can't be at work. So in terms of, you know, the leave is for those first 3 conditions are 2 weeks. The childcare was limited to 12 weeks. With the other 3, if you're, you know, once you're positive, you're not likely to have to quarantine again, because you can be positive for up to 3 months. So once you're past your, unless you're symptomatic again. So we haven't had any, Kim, we haven't had anybody twice positive that's had to go out twice for positives. We've had people had to go out for multiple times for exposure, but.
Well, I guess that's what I was asking is,
Yeah.
you know, for the exposure.
Yeah, so some people had to go out for exposure to a case at school, you know, because they were close contacts. And then that same person might have had an exposure to a family member outside of school and had to go on a second quarantine, but in unrelated events.
Okay.
So it's a hard one to really control.
Yeah, I get it. So it's, so if they test positive once, they could test positive for 3 months?
Yeah, pretty much. But if they're not symptomatic, once they're past that positive test, now it's going to go down to 10 days fairly soon.
Yeah, it's already moved down to 10 days. Yeah.
I think they were, well, CDC moved it to 10 days. IDPH is going to move it, is going to follow suit, but they haven't yet put that in writing. That's supposed to come out this week. I was on an IDPH webinar earlier today, not a school one, just a straight up state IDPH one. And they said they're gonna qualify it based on the type of institution for the 10 days. So in certain circumstances, it's still gonna be 14. In some cases, it'll be 10.
Okay.
So I don't know where the board sits with that, but you know, the board can decide not to pursue any extension, and then people will just have to use their own sick days.
And we won't know anything from the federal government until probably either by the end of the year or before, or by the end of January.
So the prediction that we've heard is that we won't hear until after the change in leadership.
Inauguration. Okay.
Mrs. Rubio, have you heard anything different in your context?
No, I have not. And that's kind of my question here. If we were to, let's say, move forward with an extension, where does, if they're not using their sick days, where would funding for paid leaves be coming from?
Well, it's still coming from the same budget. It comes from our our personnel sub budget that we doubled that budget because of COVID. So we doubled that line in terms of paying for leaves and subs. Because all along it hasn't been coming from employees' sick banks. It's been
right.
So it's still in the personnel budget. We put it into like the compensation time that we would put into a sub budget.
Can we put a limit on a date limit on it?
We could.
If we chose to continue to use that, could we put a date on it?
Yes, this is all locally in our control at this point.
I mean, I would be supportive of extending it for the first 3, like you talked about, through the rest of the school year. But beyond that, I think it would get sticky
That's what
on to after number 3.
That's why,
And as much as I have a lot of sympathy for people who are struggling with that childcare situation or difficulties with that, like now it's been a long time, and I would hope that everybody knew that this situation was going on and they had to look for alternatives. Otherwise, it leaves us in a bad position of trying to staff these classrooms. So not best for the kids to keep switching around who's where.
Yeah.
Did you think till the end of the school year, Amy, or did you? I was just thinking for until like January 31st.
Of the first 3, I mean, I think we're still stuck in the same situation probably all school year with people having exposures and things like that. But
the thing is, if the federal legislation gets extended or reenacted, if they reenact it in a different kind of way, we could revisit the impact of that on the district level decision. I mean, we could approve it with the understanding that if there's federal legislation that is subsequently passed, we would revisit it. So we could say until there's a change in federal legislation, which then I think that's what you're getting at, Kathy, maybe?
Yes,
so
that's what, yeah.
Because if we say till the end of the year, but the federal legislation has some different plan, that's no longer this, but a modification of it, we could go back to default to the federal plan and stop doing the district local plan. So we could say, you know, we would approve the extension for reasons 1, 2, and 3 until there is, or unless there is a change in federal, you know, status with relationship to the original act.
Okay, I'll make that motion for that way. If anybody,
Is there any other comment from anyone else?
Oh yeah, I mean, you should finish that.
Anybody else feel differently?
I do not. I'm good with 1, 2, and 3 and extending it. And honestly,
any other guidance, yeah.
And we'll see, you know, in this next month, you know, we're going to see what everybody else is doing as well. So, you know,
so we can say the motion that someone would need to make would be to extend the same provisions that are available under FFCRA for reasons 1, 2, and 3, pending any federal legislative changes or context, you know, local context changes.
That sounds great.
So someone has to make.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Can't make that motion for you.
I'll make that motion. What Meryl said.
I'll second it.
No, I will. What kind of Bill said to the motion to extend situations 1, 2, and 3 of the FFCRA until pending any federal legislation.
Perfect.
Mrs. Lakowitz then?
We need a second.
I did. Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Patty. Okay, yes.
Okay. Mrs. Rubio?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
yes.
Dr. Fako?
Yes.
Mrs. Restivo?
Yes.
And Dr. Paul?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I know our staff will appreciate that. A lot of this is out of their control, and I'm hoping
They've done a lot. They've done a lot for us this year, so we can do something little for them.
Yeah.
I hate to ask a question after we just voted, but is number 4 on that indicating like if a child in the household is having to quarantine and they're having to care for their own child? Like, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding number 4.
That or a parent. It's any person in your household. Yeah. So that, you know, it's interesting because you only get 2/3 rate of pay for that one right now. So in many cases, I think, Kim, when we had that situation, people substituted their sick days because they wanted their full rate of pay. So
Yes.
we run into a lot of people accessing the 2/3 option anyway.
And maybe we can even think about it on an individual basis if it had to come up to that.
So.
Well, now currently, if your child is out sick, you're having to take a sick day. So I was just trying to understand what number 4 meant exactly. So
like
that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. A COVID related reason allows you to get 2/3 rate of pay and not use your sick days. But, so it goes back to what would be typical, whether COVID or not. Okay. Are we good? Thank you for clarifying questions. Those are good. I want everyone to understand what we're talking about. So that's helpful for the audience at large as well. Okay, so we have 2 leaves of absence for maternity leaves for our social worker position and a special education position. We had 0 applicants for either one. It's hard mid-year. We got applicants for our gen ed maternity leaves, but our SPED and our social worker, we called universities. We did the handshake. Also, we posted in the handshake, which is all the universities use that database. Kathy Leslie, Mrs. Leslie did her due diligence in really trying to pound the pavement. I tried to network in my circles. There's just not a lot of candidates out there right now for those special positions. As we know, there's a teacher shortage. And interestingly enough, when you go to the contract agencies, you find them because they pay benefits. So in the long-term sub positions, people aren't paying benefits. So the candidates for the hard to fill positions are going to the contract agencies because then they do get insurance. So lo and behold, we found 2 strong candidates through a contracting agency versus on our own. So it's a little frustrating, but that's where that landed and why you're seeing the recommendation for these 2 positions. I don't anticipate needing to do that for gen ed. Mrs. Duffy's, she's good at beating bushes over there. So we've got some candidates that we're currently interviewing for our gen ed vacancy.
Analyze what we're paying the outside agency versus what it would have been if we would have hired them with benefits.
Well, we don't have a choice to hire them with that, like if they came through the agency doorway.
Right.
So we didn't get any applicants at all. If we had gotten individual applicants separate from an agency, we could have we could have explored that. We didn't even get any applicants to have a conversation with anyone about that. That's our problem. So, I mean, I think we would have analyzed that certainly if we would have run into it. We just didn't even have any applicants.
I mean, that is also a great point though, Kathy, in terms of being able to hire with benefits with a release at the end of the year. Right. If it's posted in that way, would you possibly have a different pool? Would you possibly have candidates if it was posted as? Yeah, because I'm sure that the pay would look probably similar or less than what we're going to be ending up paying to Sunbelt.
The pay was not posted. Just the
we didn't post the compensation, but Mrs. Rubio's point is if we did post it saying with benefits,
correct.
Most long-term sub positions are not with benefits, but if we posted it saying salary plus benefits, we may have gotten applicants versus the fact that we got 0.
Well, and even just, doing the math, and I don't know what the math is it even worth the conversation? Because I know when looking at doing the math on this, what we are paying is pretty substantial. So I'm just wondering, to Kathy's point, is that something to consider, or is it pretty comparable?
So it's the rate, the hourly rate is going to be about double what our long-term sub rate would be, which is about 180 divided by the 5.5 instructional days. So like it's a little bit, it's just about double what our hourly rate would be. Kim, the benefits package, we'd have to do a pro rate, and it would depend on if we offered just HMO versus PPO and if people would apply, because we have various plans. I mean, the board would have to have a whole discussion on if you wanted to offer just the HMO or the PPO, and there's cost differentials there. So I'd have to, depending on the plan, have to calculate that all out to determine it. But
we don't have to decide that now because you've made that decision, but let's maybe think about it for the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good thought for the future.
On what we are spending, I do appreciate the roll forward that you put in there on the dollars and cents and where it's all coming from. So that was helpful because there's been a lot of moving parts and obviously a lot of maternity leaves. And so it's helpful for me to get my head around where we are from a budget standpoint.
Yeah, it's been kind of crazy. And I do appreciate that thought process. We had a little bit of that discussion about benefits too versus no benefits. And it's just it would have to be a caveat for her to fill positions. I'd also have to find out if we'd run into a labor situation, and I don't know the answer to this off the top of my head, if we were doing that for special ed and social work positions, but not for our gen ed maternity leaves. I'd have to see if we'd run into an unfair labor practice around filling those positions in those ways. I don't know.
They have different job descriptions, so.
Yeah, but they're all part of our union. So
that's true. Okay.
I would want to investigate that a little bit further too.
Okay.
I read through the contracts. They seem pretty standard, are they? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, so they both wanted to charge us $71 an hour, but I talked them down a little bit. I was like, no, last year we paid this for a support position. So can we, I mean, I know it's only $3, but $3 is $3 in my book, or $2.50 and $3. They're two different agencies. So we pushed a bit to get them down a little bit, save us a little bit of money. But yeah, last year, if you recall, the paraprofessional position that we ended up having to fill contractually with was $60 an hour. So a certified at 68 is about comparable.
Should have taken the job.
And these are two different agencies. Well, you don't see all that. The agencies,
oh yeah, I know.
I'll tell you, most of it goes towards benefits, right? So these are two different agencies, and they had comparable pay scales on their contracts.
The good news is that the candidates are both very strong. So
it's helpful.
Don't always find that with contract people. So
that was helpful. Because at first I was like, I felt like I was getting punched in the gut.
All right, well, I'll make a motion to approve the contracts for the social worker and the special ed teacher vacancies.
I'll second.
You got it,
Dr.
Amy.
Powell,
Yes.
Mrs. Restivo,
Yes.
Dr. Faco,
Yes.
Mr. Grady,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Rubio,
Yes.
Mrs. Lackowitz.
Yes.
I'll go through it. I'll find out from the attorney about that for the future, though, Mrs. Rubio and Mrs. Lackowitz. Thank you for raising it. And I will also we can do a cost breakdown with both of our insurance plans, and then Kim and I we'll just bring that back in February so that we can discuss it for future, just so we know where the board would stand on it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next thing is the policies.
So Mrs. Lackowitz and Mrs. Lyons and I corresponded over email. There was nothing major in any of these first reads. They're mostly language changes or legal references. I noted them at the top in terms of whether it was a clarifying language, a legal reference update, because as you recall, we had a lot of new policies that came through this year. And so some of these are now impacted by those. And so now you have some legal reference updates across the board related to that. So if there's any questions on any of the individual policies, I'm happy to respond to those.
I did not have any.
Anybody have any questions? I think Amy and I both agree the same thing, is that they were just minor changes. There was not very much verbiage change. So being the first reading next month, we'll bring it back and we'll do the regular.
Sounds a plan. At least what I'm happy about is every time they do one of these lately, whoever's in that office now, we're getting generic language that won't have to be changed again, which is good. So that's an improvement. Okay.
Any other new business?
I think that's it. Unless anyone else has anything.
None that I can think of.
Any audience participation?
Mr. Smith, is there anybody?
Yeah, no, we did not receive any emails.
All right, and then the financial summary report that continues to to look good. I like it. Maybe in January, we could spend a few minutes just doing a halfway.
Yeah, sure. Especially with COVID, a check-in. Yeah. Well, that's why we're going to have the finance committee meeting, so we will anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other information points, some resignations, maternity leaves, and retirement.
Yeah, so the retirement, I'll speak, unless Mrs. Leslie wants to speak to that. One of our preschool aides, who's just been lovely, has a family situation that became very challenging, not COVID related. And with the risk of COVID though, and having to care for the family member, it just wasn't going to work for her to come back. She's been out since the beginning of the year, so.
Yes, she's been a great employee, and it is a big loss, and we're hoping that at some point she can come back part-time, but she's doing what she needs to do for her family.
Okay, with regret, we accept that.
Yeah, right. And I think we just need a motion to go to closed. Right?
Motion to go into closed.
Or to adjourn open, and then we'll come back to the close.
Yes.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I just have to do a recorder switch with Sarah. So,
Dr. Kirk, did you want an ISU Redbird pullover for tonight? Is that what that is?
I'm supporting the Blackhawks. If anything, it would be a fight in a line eye for me.
I know, that's why
we've got a basketball team again. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And your football team beat Nebraska
I'm not
really
talking
bad.
about football, Illinois football, just Illinois basketball.
I had a really not nice thought about why Michigan's not playing Ohio State, and I'll keep it to myself for now.
Yes, you shall. Have a wonderful Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to our administration staff. Thank you very much for all you do for
You're
all of
working
us.
so hard. Thanks, you guys, for being here tonight, and we'll regroup.
You too, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.